Hi everyone, this is Joseph. I hope you're all doing well. So Delhi is reeling under extreme and a heat wave, as is in most other parts of India and other countries. And I was just going through some of the tweets and on social media X, where people from Europe and London and people from India were battling it out and arguing whether 40 degrees is hotter in Europe than in India, which I found quite amusing. So, that aside, I'm here to tell you that I am starting a mini vlog on the murder mystery books that I'll be reading in the coming weeks. So in the past few days, I felt that my brain has frozen and I'm unable to absorb things and stuff and words. So my work involves me to read a lot of financial news, company news, and pass through the IPO papers, which I will not bore you with. And I have also been reading a lot of literary fiction, which sometimes they exhaust your brain, as some of you might know. So I wanted something light, a breezy, gripping murder mystery thrillers to help assuage and soothe my brain and help me untangle all the heaviness that my brain is currently battling with. So that's why I've decided to do this vlog. So I have 3 books with me that I picked up recently on the recommendations of some of you. So just the 3 books for now. So let's see how that will go. And whether that's going to extend into more books, but we shall see. So the first book is The Honjin Murders by Seishi Yoko Mizo. I'm referring to my laptop as well to get the names of the writers. So if I'm looking the other side, I'm looking at my laptop. So this book is translated by Louise Heal Kawai, and it's the first book in the Detective Kosuke Kidaichi series. So what attracted me to this book is because the author is referred to as Japan's Agatha Christie, and I've grown up reading quite a few in Agatha Christie, which I found to be gripping. So that's one of the reasons that really drew me to this book. And it is also a locked room and a murder mystery, which is set in the 1937, and it's set in a small town. So I think those are elements that I'm really drawn to, and that's one of the reasons why I picked this book up. The next book that I picked is Ruth Rendell's The Water's Lovely. Now Rendell is known for her Inspector Wexford series, but this is a stand-alone novel of hers. The plot follows the death of a stepfather called Guy, and it could possibly be a murder committed by a stepdaughter. Apparently, it's more of a psychological thriller rather than a murder mystery. So let's see how I fare with this in a novel. And I've never read Ruth Rendell, so if I love this, I might just dive into the Wexford Inspector Wexford series. So let's see. And the third book I picked is called The Ayakudi Murders by the late Tamil writer Indra Soundararajan. Now, I saw this book on the Instagram page of a fellow bookstagrammer, Swati Nair, who raved about it. She goes by the handle Sundoku Samurai, which I'm going to link it in the description. You can check her page, which is lovely and amazing. And this book was translated into English by Nirmal Raja Gopalan and published by Blafton Publications. The story follows Rajendran, who is a young journalist, and he's given an assignment to go to this village because apparently there is a ghost wreaking havoc. So a very enticing premise, and I think so. I'm really excited about these books. In fact, I've already started reading the Honjin Murders, and like I said, and it's set in a small town. It revolves around a family. There are gossips in it, and I'm really loving the atmosphere. So once I finish reading them, I'm going to report back, and I will see you in a second. Thanks guys for watching. Hi everyone, so I finished reading The Hundred and the Murders, and I'm recording this in a video a few days and after finishing this in a novel. So right at the outset, I must say that I enjoyed reading this in a novel, and I loved being in this world. It's very atmospheric, and if you are a fan of Agatha Christie novels, or if you have been a fan of Agatha Christie novels and are looking for something with the same vibe, I'm sure you'll certainly love this novel as well. So like I said earlier, the novel is set in 1937 and it revolves around the wealthy Ichiyanagi family who are living in a inn or a honjin in a small village. Now Kenzo, the eldest son of this family, has decided to marry a woman called Katsuko, who is a primary school teacher. But not everyone is happy with this marriage. And the primary opponents to this marriage is Kenzo's own mother, who is a widow, and Kenzo's cousin, who also lives in the same house. And the reason why they are opposed to this marriage, while unwillingly giving the green nod to this marriage, is because of Katsuko's lineage. Katsuko's father was a farmer, and it doesn't matter that Katsuko is an educated woman and she is a working woman. So apart from these characters, Kenzo also has other siblings. Two of the siblings are living in the house. His younger brother is an avid reader of mystery books, and his younger sister is just grieving the death of her cat. And two of the other siblings are living outside the village. The murder happens just a few hours after the wedding ceremony in the middle of the night when Kenzo and Katsuko both are found brutally murdered. And one of the interesting things that is introduced in the beginning of the novel is that we are told about a stranger who is roaming around the village and asking about the Ichiyanagi family. Interestingly, the novel is told through an anonymous narrator who reconstructs the entire events leading to the Honjin murders and the events after the Honjin murders, based on the witness statements and based on documents. So that itself, I think, is an interesting device, and because it builds an air of a mystery as to who this anonymous narrator is. And interestingly, our star detective, who is named Kosuke Kindaichi, is not introduced until later in the novel. And his personality really lived up to my expectations. He's in his young 20s, but he's a maverick. He's very animated. He's got ruffled hair, and he also stammers. And the interesting part is that he makes fun of his own stammer, and that's what makes this character extremely distinct and very, very likable. And I would say, in my opinion, he is a memorable as detective as the detective as the detectives in Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, and Miss Marple of Agatha and Christie. So apart from the murder mystery itself, the novel is a commentary on class. The novel is also a commentary, very importantly, on how the society perceives people with disfigurement, and how people with disfigurement are treated. So I think that is handled really well in the novel. Overall, I enjoyed it, and I am happy to report that I want to continue with the remaining books in the series, and I'm really looking forward to see how the character and personality of the detective Kosuke Kindaichi evolves through the series. So thanks for watching. I have already started reading Ruth Rendell's The Waters Lovely, and I must say I'm enjoying that as well. And I will report back once I finish reading that in the novel. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you guys in a second. Hi everyone, it's again hot in Delhi after a few days off in rain last week as I recorded this in a video. So I finished reading Ruth Rendell's the waters are lovely. And like I said in my introduction in a video, this was my first Ruth and Rendell. Now this is not a murder mystery per se, it's a kind of psychological thriller, but it's much more than that. The story is about an Ishmael and Heather, who are sisters, and when they were young teenagers, their stepfather, called a guy, was found dead in a bathtub in their house. And when that incident happened, only Heather was there. Heather's the younger sister, was there in the house, while Ishmael and the mother were outside. But Ishmael and the mother had never confronted or did not confront Heather about this incident because Heather was very young, and they had not brooded about this incident with Heather over the years and as well. So several years later, Heather is in love with a nurse called Edmund, and when Ishmael sees this, she thinks that it is a duty to talk to Edmund and tell Edmund about what Heather could have possibly done when she was a teenager. But she never gets the opportunity, or she never plucks up the courage to talk to Edmund about it. And Heather and Edmund get married later on. Meanwhile, Ishmael is going through a very turbulent relationship with her boyfriend Andrew, who's now seeing some other girl. So because of that, Ishmael forgets about the stepfather incident altogether. But the book is more than that, and it becomes a story of several characters who are interlinked. One of the standout characters is a character called Irene, who is Edmund's mother. And Irene is not happy about Edmund's choice of Heather as her partner. And instead, Irene would have liked Edmund to marry a lady or a woman called Marion, who is an elder to Edmund. Now, Marion is another interesting character in the novel. She has this knack of befriending elderly people and extending help to them. But what is the motive behind that for Marion? That becomes an intriguing and a very crucial part of the entire plot or rather the subplot in the book. The novel becomes a commentary on a class, toxic relationships, not just between lovers, but between mother and son, between the neighbors. It also becomes a story of blackmail, and all of this culminates into another murder in the story. I enjoyed most parts of the book, but I really felt extremely frustrated towards at the end of the book, and because one of the characters could not stand up for themselves, and that just did not work for me. Maybe that was the point of the writer. But will I be reading another Ruth Rendell? I loved her writing style overall, and I also like the fact that she carves out distinct characters, and it also made me quite nostalgic about different parts of London that she talks about in this book. So overall, I liked it, but let's see, maybe I will get around to reading a Ruth Rendell book that I will wholeheartedly love. So I will get on to the next book, which is the Ayakuri Murders, and I will report back on that in just a bit for you all. Thanks for watching. Hi everyone, so I'm recording this in a video after a huge gap since I recorded another video on Ruth and Rendell, and it's not because I wasn't enjoying Ayakuri Murders, but there was a lot of intervention from life and work, and the intervention from life included the huge student uprising against the government that India saw, which made some of the people feel that democracy is still up and running in the country. So that aside, let's get on to the Ayakuri Murders. Like I said, I really enjoyed this novel, and as I said in my introduction in a video, I saw this book on the Instagram and a page of Bookstagrammer, Swati Nair, who's an Instagram and handle. I'm going to link in the description and below. Now, this novel follows a journalist Rajendran, who is sent by an editor to a village called Ayakudi, which is a real village in Tamil Nadu, because they've received a letter from a young girl saying that there are rumors about spirits and ghosts in the village, but the girl thinks that there is actually a prisoner or a criminal who has escaped in a prison who is up to something in the village. So that has really piqued the interest of the editor, and is now sending in a Rajendran to investigate and to report about it. So when Rajendran reaches an Ayakudi, he feels the tension in the village, and he also senses that there is something sinister going on in the village. And no sooner he reaches the village, he finds out that there's already a death that has happened, and one murder after another keeps happening. I do think that some of the twists in the story are predictable, but the writer makes up by adding a layer of a twist to the motive behind the murder, which makes it quite compelling. There is also an element of a romance in the book, and the way it unfolds is a bit too melodramatic, but you can just forgive it, because that's a small part of it, and it leads to a happy ending as well. But I think the novel is a commentary on superstition, and whether the superstitious beliefs that people hold, and the belief in supernaturalism can be easily dismissed in the modern times. So there is also the history of colonialism laced inside the story. But I think the most important question that the story or the novel asks, and which I think is also very pertinent to the times that we are living in, is if the government is doing enough for the public, especially in the rural or smaller towns and in the cities. So overall, I really enjoyed reading this novel, and I raced through the second half, and because I really wanted to know the answers and find out who the real culprits are, and what the motive behind those murders are. So that brings me to the end of this mini vlog, where I read 3 murder mysteries, psychological thrillers, and I enjoyed reading all of them largely. And this vlog is, or has become much longer than I earlier anticipated, but I've really enjoyed doing this, and I hope to come up with more such videos in the future. And if you've watched this entire mini vlog and reached till this section, I would like to thank all of you for watching. Thank you again.